Hi, Vincenzo, good evening. This is Naveen Anjandappa from 12 Principles Consulting, and I'm happy that you have been able to join this program and selected a topic which is Scrum Events to go ahead and talk about it. So, hi, Vincenzo, good evening. So, over to you. You can go ahead and present it.
Okay, thank you, Naveen. Thank you, everyone in the live streaming. Let me share my screen with the small presentation that I've made about the Scrum events and a small focus on a retrospective. I will give some insight on what I have experienced in the last year practicing Scrum as a Scrum Master. So a brief and short discussion about me. So just after I get graduated from the university, I've started working in the agile let's say environment and scope, and I immediately started to work as a Scrum Master and a facilitator in the continuous improvement of the company in which I still work. So as I said here, I've been working in multiple teams also at the same times, and I had the fortune to experience also teams in very different environments. So I went from the more technical to the more HR to the more financial, etc. So something I will say today, it's also comes from the background that I had in all this project. As a person, I'm always looking in way to improve the practices and how we work. So I really enjoyed being a Scrum Master, and I had the luck to start this path almost 2 years ago. Okay. So as Naveen said today, my topic for today is the Scrum events. As you can see, the Scrum framework can be represented with this picture. And during my, let's say, internal trainings that I do to my colleagues, I always say, if at the end of the session you are at least able to remember the events and what happened each one, it's a good start in implementing Scrum. So I will go through each single event. And in this moment, I just want to remind you that before starting with the events, there is always a huge part before, that is the divergent and convergent thinking, the product vision definition, and as you can see here, the product backlog definition. Once we have the product backlog, we can start with the sprinting. So the first event, as the Scrum Guide says, it's the sprint itself. Why? Because it's always something that has a certain limit in the time. In fact, the typical duration is between 2 and 4 weeks. And when we say that Scrum a project is run through the Scrum methodology, it means that the progress of the project run through sprints. So there are multiple sprints inside the project, and each sprint, the goal is to deliver a product increment that is something the team can potentially give to the customer, ready to be used, and so to be delivered. As a note here, I put that if, for what we have seen in my experience, keeping the duration always the same through all the whole project helps in create the rhythm in the team. So they know every month there will be a retrospective, a planning, and so on. And we will see. Okay, first event, the sprint planning. I will start just with the basic information. It's the maximum time box, as the framework suggests, it's maximum 8 hours. And I've just to give you some of my experience, I've never reached this 8 hours because once the team become used and they understand and you create the right mindset, it becomes easier and easier and easier. So the sprint planning can be divided basically into 2 main parts. Also, if now the Scrum Guides divided it in 3. But the main answer we want to get from the sprint planning are what we want to deliver at the end of the sprint, so which is our goal, and how we will reach this goal through the sprint. So which are the activity that will be done. The sprint planning, it's attended by the whole Scrum team, so the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team. here, when I always say development team, consider not only actual software developers, but I had the luck to work also with colleagues from any other function. So we don't use, actually, I don't use Scrum only for software related project. In any case, I has here at the end, I added a small note that the development team is the one that has always the final say. So the final word, if it's clear, if the goal is feasible or not. So if we want to go more in detail and give some hint more on the sprint planning, what can we say? So as I said, there is the whole team, and the answer that we have to give to which we have to, the question to which we have to answer during the sprint planning are the three listed here. So who is giving the idea of why the sprint is valuable? The actor here is mainly the PO. So the PO step inside the sprint planning meeting and start to describe why that specific sprint it's valuable for the whole product. Remember, we are always working, at least this is what I say to my colleagues, we are always working for the product, not for the project. The agile mindset means also not focusing only on arriving at the end of the project, but delivering value at the end of every sprint. So that's, the product owner starts and describes why, with some word and sentences, this sprint it's valuable. It's always good to put down this sentence so everyone can focus on this during the sprint. As for my experience, for week, it's not that much as a time, but people tend to have anything else to do, and maybe they will forget why we are still doing this. So once the goal is set, the other question we have to answer is what can we do to reach this goal? And this answer brings in deciding which product backlog items, so user stories mostly, you want to bring inside the sprint to be completed in this period. Again, in this moment, it's mainly the PO who takes the lead and said, okay, with my vision and the feedback we received and the consumer side, etc., maybe we can work on this, that, and those stories. Obviously, here there is a discussion. It's not a one way from the PO. The team can always reply. After giving the product backlog items that we want to bring inside the sprint, the development team becomes the leading part of the planning and try to answer to the question how we will choose and what we will do actually to reach the goal. So the concrete activity. So for each stories, we define the task. So the outcome of the sprint planning, as I wrote on the right, are mainly the sprint goal, so a sentence, the product backlog items in which we work, and a plan, a set of activities on which we decide to work during the sprint. Once we have this element at the end of a sprint planning, we can say that it was successful, and this event can be closed, let's say, with success. At the end of the planning, we start the implementation phase. You can see here the bigger part of the circle. And in the implementation phase, so the team start to work on the actual product increment. But as the Scrum framework says, we have always to keep in mind the inspection and adoption mindset. And so this is why during the implementation phase, so during the sprint, we have this event called Daily Scrum. The Daily Scrum, it's basically all the events, a time box events of maximum 15 minutes. And this is very important. Don't let people try to say 15 minutes are it's too less. We cannot discuss all the topic. We should do half an hour. Maybe for one time we can do 45 minutes, then we will go back to the 15. This is something that is not doable because people tend to like the rhythm, the constant in the time. So if you change the duration, it's not good. So this is why the Scrum framework suggests 15 minutes. And I can assure that also with the bigger teams that I had, keeping the 15 minutes always help. So the scope of the daily Scrum is to inspect how the activities are going. So how the plan is being implemented during the sprint, if we are following what we thought, and if we are actually moving toward the sprint goal. Here I want the last note. It's just another, let's say, hint from my experience. We don't have to pass the message to everyone in the company or to the Scrum teams itself that the daily Scrum is a meeting in which we simply exchange the status. People, the first time you start to talk about daily Scrum, they think that it's just a meeting where you say, okay, this is done, this is not done, and move it here, leave it there, etc. But it's more about really understanding how is the feeling inside the team, if there are impediments in which other people can help. And this is something I've seen in my experience, where the team gets more and more mature. You will see that when there is an impediment, so you have an inspection and you have an impediment, then the adaptation is just maybe another team member that steps in and said, okay, listen, Vincenzo, I can help you in this. And it's a great value for the deployment of the value for the product. As I say, when I also try to explain Scrums to my colleagues, one of the way we can imagine to lead, so one of the technique we can use in the inspection and adoption during the Scrum meeting is to try to answer to this 3 questions that I put here. So what did, and by you, I mean the whole team, what did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And is there anything that is creating an impediment to you, that is slowing you down? So we are trying to understand what was done since the last Scrum meeting we had, what will be done for the next Scrum meeting, and if the team member has any problem in the activity he's doing. Now, just to be very clear, as a Scrum Master, I've never asked this question directly to the team member, because it's not what the Scrum Guide says, is that you should reply to this, but how you reply to this question is up to the tools and technique you use. So basically, one of the easiest way is just to have a working agreement that a certain task in a certain position in one of the status that typically are in the Scrum, so to do, backlog, progress, done, is answering to a certain question. So if it's in backlog, it's something you are not touching. If it's in to do, maybe you are starting to get involved into it, etc. So just to be clear, don't expect to come inside a meeting as a Scrum Master and just always ask this question to the single person. This is not how a Scrum Master, the daily Scrum take place. Okay, and this is the daily Scrum. Then towards the end of the sprint, we have the sprint review. Here it's a very important meeting, like all the rest, where the teams present to the stakeholder, and with stakeholder, I mean everyone that can help, and I underline this, help the team, not judging the team or the work of the team, helping the team in understanding if the way they are working and the direction they are having with the product is the right one. So it's the one that they had in their mind. So the main scope of the sprint retrospective is to get feedback, of the sprint review, sorry, is to get feedbacks from the stakeholder. So the stakeholder could be a management person, a senior or a middle manager, but could be and should be also a customer, a final customer or the first layer customer, then depends on the project, but could be also who will use actually the product. And the scope again is to get the sentiment from the stakeholder, understanding if we are doing it right. Why is this important? Because we have to adapt our product backlog, not the sprint backlog, because the sprint is already finished basically, but we have to adapt the stories and maybe have a new plan for the next sprint based on the feedback we have. We can receive feedback. And I had the situation in which the stakeholder said, okay, just fine, go ahead, maximum speed. And other review in which we don't have to be afraid. And this is something as a Scrum Master, we have to teach to the whole organization and to our team to don't be afraid also to say, no, I don't think this is the right direction. Let's sit together and understand how we can improve. So also the stakeholder needs a lot of training, not only the team members, just to give you an idea. So as I said here, the maximum duration for this event is 4 hours for a 4-week sprint. Like all the events except the daily Scrum, the duration can be adjusted if the sprint is shorter. The whole team participates, so you have again the stakeholder and the whole Scrum teams. And here we decide, basically we get an understanding of what to do next. After the sprint review, we arrive to the last event in the Scrum framework, which is the sprint retrospective. And after this, I will give you some idea from my experience and something that maybe can help you understand if you are in the same situation. So the sprint retrospective starts stands for a maximum duration of 3 hours for always a 4-week sprint, always adjustable. And the key element here is to understand if we can improve. So again, inspection and adoption on the way we are working, how we are working. Now we remove here the what we did. So the product was working, was not working, etc. We are not discussing if the product increment was good, but how we arrived to the product increment and how we work to reach this. And how these events and this situation lead to a successful product increment or maybe a not successful product increment. So it's very different from a sprint review. And this is something I usually get as a question is, but is not similar to the sprint review. And I will always underline that it's very, very different. They are two different topics. Again, we inspect and adapt, and here we decide what we can improve in the next sprint. It's important here to have the whole Scrum team participating. So now I will give you some points from my experience about the sprint retrospectives. So why it's important to have a sprint retrospective at the end of the sprint? It's the first point that I put here. It's important because during the sprint, I'm 100% sure you always see this. The Scrum team's goal is mostly to create the product increment. So you will always, and I had occasion in which the team was working really hard and saying during the sprint, you can hear them say, okay, but we should do this. We could change the testing plan. We can change how we perform the script, etc. But at the end, during the sprint, they work always in the same way. Why? Because they are concentrating on the product increment. And this point is just to reply to one simple question that I always receive from the new buy in the Scrum, and is, can we just jump the sprint retrospective? Why we do the sprint retrospective? I mean, we go there, we sit, we try to understand. So the first question that I give is that, think of it. You are working really hard during the sprint and you miss the opportunity to improve yourself. This is the first answer. Then I had other cases. Let's start from the mature team. Because one can say, okay, when you get mature, maybe you don't have this problem in a mature team. And no, we have always this problem. Why? Because once the team gets mature, he thinks that, okay, I know how it works. We sit down, we understand, we define, we talk. And at the end, we define some action. And so the typical answer is, okay, but we don't need this meeting. And again, as a Scrum Master, it's always our focus to explain and let people get really the mindset, not just applying the events. We cannot just say, no, you have to do it because the Scrum Guide says it. We have to teach the people the value behind each event. And so with the mature team, there is always to work also. With the young team, instead, it's the opposite. They don't get for the value of the meeting itself, of this event, and they just say, for us, it's a waste of time. We have to work to reach the goal. We have to work to create the product increment, and so why we are sitting and thinking on how we can improve. We will see at the end of the project. So you will see there is this tend to procrastination. They will say, okay, maybe this retrospective, we could just stay here and have a small rounding table, or just have an exchange of ideas. So they will try to minimize this event. And this is from my experience, obviously, but also talking with other Scrum Master from other contexts, far away from only my company. Okay. So having said that, I want to just give you some very clear point on what can we do. Okay, the first one, it's very clear, and you can see it's short. Don't compromise on the events. As I said, don't be fooled by the teams on jumping the events. I say here the sprint retrospective mainly, but also the sprint review. They could say, but why do we sit? I always give the status report to my manager. And then you have to stop as a Scrum Master and say, wait, one moment. The wrong thing is here is not that you don't want to make the review, is that you are giving the status report to your manager. So maybe something else is wrong, not the event itself. So, and you have to get all this information, this small signal from around. The second point that I put, it's always work with the top management. And the top management, I don't only mean the highest part of the hierarchy, but also the middle management. Why I say that? Because maybe some team member don't want to attend to a sprint retrospective or any other events, because the top management is simply saying, oh, but why do you waste the time in that meeting? Just skip it. Tell Vincenzo that you are busy and don't go. So it's a lot of work to have a real agile transformation as a Scrum Master, because it's not only, hey, as a Scrum team, take this event, apply them, you are done. There is a huge amount of work going on. So the third point, as I said, be ready to explain over and over. Don't stop. As I said, don't compromise, and always have the idea clear in your mind why we do this and why it's valuable and why we should keep doing it. Then for the retrospective itself, one, let's say, suggestion that I've seen that work is don't use always the same style. So try to mix the card on the table, try to movement a little bit the retrospectives. Don't let the people just sit and think, okay, you will do this, I will do that. Everything is already defined. So changing the cards help the people getting more out. Maybe you will take the person in a situation where it's outside the comfort zone, and he will put on the table maybe some topic that otherwise he will not have expressed. Another important point is always in all the event, and mainly in the sprint retrospective, let everyone speak. Don't just say, oh, this is a shy person, we don't have to listen to him. If he doesn't have anything to say, it means that everything is fine. No, it does not work like this. I've experienced it. I've made mistakes, and I keep doing mistakes as everyone. And as a Scrum Master, I always find way to improve also in this. And why I say let everyone speak, because if one person feel that, okay, that they don't care about what they say, at the end, the event was run. They closed it. We went to our work, back to our work. The effect is that the person at that point will say, why I should participate to the next one? Why it's valuable, my presence? Instead, as a Scrum Master, we have all makes to make the team member feel they are valuable for the whole product increment. And then for specific for the retrospective, a concrete suggestion is to end the retrospective always defining some concrete action. So if I'm not wrong, in the Scrum book, it's not said that you have to put an element from the retrospective inside the product backlog. But I find that is very, very valuable, because at this point you will start the next retrospective thinking on what you actually committed and mutually agreed inside that team for the sprint. So you will start saying, okay, do you feel that we actually improved that part we discussed in the last sprint retrospective? So these are just some hint. I know many people usually ask me, but how many framework do you have? How many tools do you have to run a retrospective? As Naveen said in many of his courses, there are infinite tools and technique we can use for the retrospective. So there is not a right way, but it's always to try to find our context. Every team is different. Every team in a different moment of his life. It's in a different path. In the path, it's in a different condition. Could be mature, performing, storming. There are different concepts, and every teams need a different approach. I would like to end this short session on the events with simply this sentence that I quite like. So if you adopt only one of the agile practice, let it be retrospective. I can guarantee you also from my feeling, and I agree with that, everything else will follow. So you will see that the continuous improvement will start to get in the mindset of the people, and they will start to perform better and better and better. So that was it. We are at the end. I don't know if there are questions.
Thank you, Vincenzo. Thanks for your presentation. That was nice. You can stop your presentation so that I can go ahead with few questions that come up.
Let me try to exit here. How do I stop it? Okay.
Okay, awesome. So the first question that came up was from Adi Selvan, who was asking, is the duration of a daily Scrum changing or different for different teams of different sizes? If the number of people in the teams are different, is the daily Scrum duration different?
Okay, the long answer short, no. The duration, it's always 15 minutes. But again, as I said, if we feel that the team cannot discuss all the point in the 15 minutes, we should ask why. So the reason behind it. And what I found in many cases is that maybe it's the moment to scale up the team. So maybe we are putting too many stuff inside the same team, and we cannot discuss it clearly. So if you get in the situation of having the 15 minutes not being enough, start to think if there is too much stuff on that team. So going into two teams and go in the scaled framework. This is my experience.
So less than 15 minutes is okay?
Actually, if the teams conclude less than 15 minutes, he has the other minutes to discuss between itself. We don't say less than 15 minutes, it's okay. I mean, you can close it in less than 15 minutes, but that should not be the goal of the team. The risk to say less than 15 minutes is okay is to have the team just willing to put the task and say, okay, this is done, this is not done. We have finished in 5 minutes, goodbye and see you next time. This is the risk we see. So we always point to the 15 minutes and say, guys, we finished to discuss the task. You were great in doing it in less than 15 minutes, but we have some minutes more. Do you have to discuss of something else? And so you can use it to share the knowledge, to share some impediment, to find at that point some action, whatever you feel.
Okay, that's awesome. So now another question that came up is, can the team have multiple sprint reviews during a sprint? Can they get the demonstration of the product and review the product and then the functionalities during the sprint multiple times? or it should be only at the end of the sprint?
Okay, the Scrum framework, as I said, one review for the stakeholder. But if, and this is something I usually encourage on my team, if the team gets an opportunity to show and get feedback from, I don't know, something we didn't expect, something that is just quick, there is this opportunity, let's go there and let's get feedback. I always encourage this, because again, the mindset should be inspect and adapt, and every opportunity to inspect and adapt, it's valuable and should be considered for the team. So the answer is no. You can make also the presentation and receive feedback also, not only in the review. The other way around, you should not perform a review to the same person, because then there is this deviation, let's say, to say, okay, I will show my part of the job to my stakeholder, to my manager before the review, so he's prepared. This is another deviation from it's something bad, let's say. So we have always to get this signal and work in avoiding them.
Yeah, I can understand and resonate with that. Like, you just go ahead and talk to somebody whom you know would say yes to your work, or to get a place where I get a feedback much ahead of what people would think in their sprint review, and get this stuff. But certainly I agree, that it is okay for the team members to go ahead and then have a feedback taken. But then at the end of the sprint, we do a review, sprint review, which is typically an inspect and act on the product, not just on the functionality, but also how the product is shaping towards its release, on its roadmap, the changes towards the roadmap, changes towards the product backlog items, the priorities, or any updates that needs to be done. Thank you. Yep. There was another question which was talking about, is there a different way or a method to conduct a retrospective, sprint retrospective?
If I get the question right, if there is a way, there are infinite way you can run a retrospective. But if you read some books, they will, let's say, always present you some tools. So some techniques, the lacked, learned, etc., or the 5 whys. There are a lot, but at the end you should always ask yourself, why are we doing this? And I remember from one of the book I have read, maybe it's the sprint retrospective, how to make the team good, great, something like that. I don't remember the exact title. They will show you that in a sprint retrospective, there are always some phases. Also, if you don't follow and you don't think to that phases, you will see that there is a phase where you just welcome everyone. So you set the stage. So you say, welcome everyone, we are here to do this, and the value is there. We are doing this because, etc. Then we get the data, we get the thought of the team member, we share them, we try to understand them, we try to prioritize or brainstorm on what we just said. We define some priority, and at the end we define the, let's say, the topic, the element we want to bring in our product backlog to be an improvement. So yes, there are some kind, but you are free actually.
Okay, in fact, there was one more question related to it, which was, what is the best tool for a sprint retrospective? And I know you have already quoted me on this, that there are a lot more, infinite, and a lot more tools to do it. But I would change this question now to, what is your favorite tool for retrospectives, sprint retrospectives? Which one do you feel, have you felt comfortable, and which one would you love using it in your sprint retrospective?
Okay, it's actually very simple. So when we talk about the tool, first of all I want to make clear that when we talk also about the tool, you should also think if your team is collocate, so it's all in the same room, or if it's distributed around the world, this could also happen. So my favorite tool, concretely speaking, it's always the post-it. So let's start from this. I like using the post-it, having the person inside the same room, seeing them in face and the body, and getting also the say non-verbal expression of the people. So this is the first thing. I like it to do it in presence. Then as a, let's say, a framework that I like to use and I've seen people like also is we call it the sailboat retrospective, but could be called in many different ways. It's the hot air, the car, the mountain retrospective, where you basically have 4 topics, which are two topics are what you felt what made you feel good. The other 2 topics are what make you feel, let's say, sad. And then each of them is one towards the past. So it's really a retrospective on what happened, and the other part is how you see it in the future. So with this kind of retrospective, the team can get a complete idea on what is good, what can be improved, both in the past and what they think for the future. It's really, really nice approach.
Okay, I would, that was nice. So I would take a liberty to put in one of my favorite tools that I use. Most often I prefer using a sailboat as one of the technique. This is my personal choice, even though I don't use it for every sprint retrospective, but one of my favorites. The reason is, in the retrospective, I tend to put in the context of continuous improvement, with the context bringing up as the goal is to become more effective, faster, and better. So a sailboat which talks about what are the things that makes us go slow and what are the things that makes us go faster. When we look at these 2 areas of what made us go slow in a sprint, our focus would be to make these things that make us go slow to be worked upon, continuously improved, and as a team we can go faster and more effective. So that was my one of my favorite tools for retrospective of the many. Okay, the next is I have a good message for you from Enrico Panna, your friend. He is message saying that it's great and proud to hear you on this presentation. So thank you, Enrico, for the message.
Thank you.
The next message is from Neeraj Singh. He's asking, I am new to the Scrum Master responsibility. I would like to know how to maintain a Scrum board. Basically, he's looking at the information radiators that we use during the sprint for the developers. What is the tool that is good for using it and how to maintain it?
Okay, so there are, let's say, also before the pandemic, if someone asked me which is the tool, I would always say a beautiful board in a room on the wall where you can see clearly the status, and we'd always post it on the status of each task and how it's moving along. Now, obviously, the world is changing. There is more smart working. There is more work around the world. So the tool, it's more or less they are always online. If you are asking me which one do you prefer, I think that at the end they are all similar. They always allow you or us as a Scrum Master to create some columns that shows the status in which the task is. And also they allow to the people to see the status, to have a clear picture of it. And so my main suggestion on how do you maintain a board, an information radiator on this, is to have a clear working agreement with your team, letting them understand why it's important to maintain it, and why we should do it. It's not just to make it beautiful. The value behind this, someone that walks in should be able to understand and catch at the first glance on what we are working and where is the value that the team is deploying. So we personally use an online tool from the many that are available, and we worked a lot on the people, and this is a suggestion I can give, is to work on a working agreement that is the most, at least we found it useful, that is the more shared in the organization as shared as possible. So don't change the working agreement between one team and another. You will see that people will say, okay, but maybe it's better if we add another column. It's okay, that's fine for the team, but always the working agreement, so the base behind the actual columns and task stuff, etc., should be more or less the same. This will help you as a Scrum Master in having less difficulty when the person maybe will move from one team to another. You will not. There will be less time to start and run it and start and get mature on this.
Okay, awesome. There's one more question from Deepika, who is asking, is there any example that you could quote from your experience where you take any point in the retrospective, a continuous improvement point that you had learned from the retrospective, and how did it help the team during the sprint, or how did you apply that learning into the sprint? Deepika is asking for an example of any such situation,
Yes.
such example that you want to share.
Yeah, the thinking of an example is more difficult than what they think it seems, because there are so many, but I will make one that maybe can be shared among many people that is more in the software development team. So at the end of the sprint review, at the sprint review we arrived, we presented our product, how it was performing, the value we deployed, etc. The review went great. I mean, great feedback, everything okay, go ahead, full speed. And then we arrived at the sprint retrospective. And the person and one of the developers started to complain and saying, yes, it's beautiful. We have, so he put basically a post saying, yes, we had a great result, but the 90% of the task was assigned to one person, to few person, not just one. That's impossible. It's to few person. And then if you are not a Scrum Master in a certain mindset, you will say, okay, so the team is relying only on one person, on two person, or two people. And so we started the discussion, the brainstorming part, and we said, okay, why this make you feel good, makes you feel bad? By the way, the person who put that post, it was not one of the person that was involved. So it was like me saying that all the tasks were for Naveen, not mine. It was for it was really in a strange mood for the other person. So so why do you feel okay? Many tasks were for him, but you know that there is his name, but we have to. There is a shared knowledge. There is a shared work. Okay, so we start to understanding and investigating this thing during the retrospective, and we came up with a very simple action. So we said, okay, whenever you feel like that there are too many tasks on that person, make it say it, just say it, and let's see what happened. So what actually happened is that this person was right. So also, if the person who had the task did not complain about anything, it was normal. He was used to have a lot of stuff on his shoulder. But once during the sprint, we started to make it visible that okay, the person said, look, the 90% of the tasks in progress are for that person. Is it okay? We started to spread more the task and the activity. So to share more, we had two results. The first one that is obvious, that person had less work. Everyone had a little bit more, and so we gained speed because that person had more time to do also other stuff inside the same project. The second benefit that you have always to think as a Scrum Master, that maybe it's not directly involved in your sprint velocity or sprint burn down chart, etc., is the knowledge that you create in this way. Because giving more activities to the other team member helped the rest of the people to get more ideas, work on different topics. So we called it the T-shape learning. So you are very specific on a topic, but you know also something around you. And this kind of things can help the whole project to go faster. So this is just one of the many concrete, simple examples. But Just to say that there could be also another very simple. You arrive at the retrospective and the person says, look, you always say to me that what I say it's not right. I don't feel like in this team I will not perform any task in the next sprint. It's something with this situation. If during the retrospective you are able to make the people mutually agree on a new practice to work together, you have already gained one person in the next sprint, basically. So you will see many things during the sprint retrospective. I always enjoy the sprint retrospective.
Awesome. That was nice, Vincenzo. In fact, the sprint retrospective has to be more collaborative. And I always say this, people should enter the sprint retrospective with a mindset that when we walk out of this room, we should be more effective and collaborative than what we were before. I think that mindset would just certainly help the team to get going much better. And for people who have been hearing about Vincenzo talking about the working agreement, there is a separate video on working agreement, which talks about why, what, how to create it. You can go ahead and watch it. It should be about 5 to 6 minutes of a video. And then Vijay was asking me, Vijay was asking me about Vivai was asking me about story point estimations. There is another video which is on story point estimation and estimations itself. Kindly watch it. We are going to avoid that question for this discussion. So let me take up another question from Vivai on this, which is, if there is a defect identified during a sprint, do you need to fix it in the same sprint, or will it be planned for the next sprint? If so, bug fixing will become more important than the achieving the sprint stuff. So can you please go ahead with this?
Okay, let's address this. My answer is, like many answers, it depends. And it depends always on, and this is mostly on the ends of the PO and the management of the priorities inside the team. Fixing a bug is for sure important, and we know always work in an environment where our bosses says, okay, quality is #1 priority, but then they also say cost and time, and etc. It's always #1 priority. But they say, okay, quality is #1 priority. But think of it, if during the sprint, maybe this team, if it's really software development, very fast software development, I will go for the 2 weeks, let's say, or 1 week sprint. Is it really valuable to stop the activities you planned to fix the bug before and then move to do what you planned already, and you will leave some stuff back? I will say that in certain conditions, it's also good to don't address the bug. Say, okay, we have found the bug. Go to the review and make it visible to the stakeholder and say, dear stakeholder, this is our product increment, but we have already found this bug. We will change our backlog in a way that in the next sprint, instead of developing other 2 features, we will do 1 feature and 1 bug, and we will solve the bug. The other way around, if the team is really high performing and the sprint is long enough, you can say, okay, we have some spare time to also fix that bug. If it's a really huge bug, let's say you make a merge in some sort of code and you find basically a mega bug, you cannot stop the whole team work to solve it. Maybe you have just before to sit and think on how to solve it, and then in the next sprint you solve it. So there is always no clear answer to this kind of questions.
Okay, this is one of my favorite topic, and I will take another liberty to put in my thoughts here, if it is okay for you.
Yes.
Okay. Most often, this is what I would present it to the teams that I have been coaching, in a very interesting graphical way of saying this. And I'm sure that you will have a smile on your face with this answer, and you do agree with me. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the question, like, there is a test case failure, and the option is yes, there is a test case failure. Does this impact the functionality that has been developed in the sprint? If the answer is yes, go fix it now. And if the answer is no, it does not impact the functionality that is developed in the sprint now, then can we fix it as part of the work that we are doing right now? So whatever is the work that we are doing, can we fix it as part of the work? The problem could be somewhere else, but can we fix it? If the answer is yes, fix it now. If the answer is no, we cannot fix it. Now the next question is this fix important for a release that we are going to do? Is this fix supposed to be in the release that we are going to give it to the customer? If the answer is yes, fix it now. If the answer is no, it is not important for a release, will you fix it later? The answer is yes, I will fix it later. So it is certain that you're going to fix this problem. You're not going to let it go off. And if you want to pay more to get it fixed later, if the answer is yes, then create a new product backlog item. If the answer is no, I don't want to pay more later, then fix it now. Which means there is only one option where you can go ahead and create a product backlog item for just fixing a problem. And that is you want to pay more for fixing it later. And all the other options will one way or the other lead to fix the problem right now. I think that's an interesting way, but there are variations that depends on the priority of the problem, the need at that point in time. But predominantly a product owner takes a call at that point in time. I do agree. Okay. Let's go to the next question. And this is the next question is from the user says life learning, but then why does it say that Scrum guide says there are 4 Scrum events in one place and in another place it says 5 Scrum events? Please explain. Does Scrum have 5 events or 4 events?
When I started to work with Scrum, I had this feeling too. So why they consider basically the answer is someone considered the sprint as the container for all the other events, and so they say no, it's not an event, it's just a container. While someone else can say no, it's an event, but because how do you define an event? You say that an event is something that takes place between 2 moments in time. This is an event basically. And the sprint, what is a sprint? It's something that starts in one moment and ends in another. You know when the sprint starts and ends. So it's by definition an event. And I personally agree on this. The sprint, it's an event and you should attend the event. And I say this for a particular reason. Sometimes I get this kind of feedback from the teams. Oh, Vincenzo, if we can have 1 week more in the sprint, we can actually release also another product backlog item that will be very, very interesting for the stakeholder. So please give us more 1 week more. As if I could give 1 week more. I mean, it's wrong, the question itself. Yes, the Scrum Master can say the events take place today or tomorrow, but it's not the Scrum Master that says when the sprint ends. It's the framework. We all agree to follow certain rules and in the framework. And so this is why I always say, look, the sprint, it's an event. Do we make more than 15 minutes for the daily Scrum? No. Do we take more than 8 hours for the sprint planning? No. Do we take more than 4 weeks for the sprint itself? No. Simple. Or if we agreed to be a sprint of 2 weeks, do we take more time? No. So I usually also use this event concept of the sprint to educate the people on the sprint is just not a moment. You say, okay, we start here and we end whenever. No, it's not like this.
Okay, that's an interesting one. In fact, I have an answer for this, which is my own thoughts. I always ask this question: which is the nearest star to sun, and which is the nearest star to Earth? If you understand the question carefully, on one case, the reference is the sun, and which is the nearest star. It is called as Alpha Centaurus in the constellation of Centaurus. And which is the nearest star to the Earth, it is the sun. So if you look at the Scrum guide, in the place where it defines the sprint, in a sprint, there are 4 events. In Scrum, there are 5 events. So when it looks at the Scrum as a whole and a framework, it talks about 5 events, which includes the sprint. When you talk about the sprint and you are looking at events inside the sprint, then there are 4 events inside the sprints. And we all know that. So it's just the reference that is changing. That's where I do agree, and good answer there. Okay, one last question before we wind up. As a Scrum Master, how to build the courage in the Scrum team? Please explain with some real-time example. Or probably you could quote one of your examples or experience. How did you increase or make your team members be courageous in the activities that they do? Remember, courage is being able to work on tough problems, being able to call out spade a spade, and then do the right things. So how do you build that courage in the team?
We can say that I like to say this: the courage in the teams cannot be, let's say, taught. You cannot just teach the courage to the person inside the team. You have to create, and this is my answer, you have to create the right environment. You have to create a safe environment for the team. So a concrete example on how the team can increase the courage. You can have very different situation, but I will give you just one. We had this new team. It was made all of new team member to Scrum, so it was fresh new, like no one knew what the Scrum was. And then you can during the sprint planning, you can feel from what they were saying that they didn't want to commit much to the sprint. They basically said, no, but let's do a little bit. And at one point, as a Scrum Master, when you are sure you are doing it for a certain issue, you say, "Dear team, why are you saying this? Why do you are? It's clear that you are retaining yourself. You are not." And they said, "Oh, well, why? In the stakeholder of this project, we have that manager that is well known to make some strong comment, and maybe will not appreciate if we don't end all the product at backlog item." And so I just said, is this a problem? So you are retaining yourself on the value to be deployed because of the comment of one of the stakeholders. Is it really what you want to do in doing a Scrum? And so in that case, I was, let's say, a middle part in the discussion and say, okay, you feel this. I will say that. Put in the backlog all the item you feel you can actually do and create during the sprint. Jump, just don't wait, go. And we will see what will happen at the sprint review. Obviously, as a Scrum Master, I took this as let's say, as a way of improving for the team, and then I had to talk with the specific manager in that case. And being very, very, very transparent, I said, okay, dear manager, I had this team who was planning and retained itself for the planning. So you have a team that is doing less than what you could do because of your comment. Is it what you want in the company? And they say clearly, it's a no. And they say, so next time we have a sprint review, try to make some comments. And then obviously to the team, I had to explain that also the negative comments are welcome during the review. We cannot expect to have always, oh yeah, great, etc. But it's the way you work. And there is one of the, I don't remember if it was during the course of the Advanced Scrum Master on one of your videos, where you said that you have to teach the stakeholder to always start a sentence this, okay, how can I help you if you had this problem? And so once you let the team member understand that they are in a safe environment, they can fall, and nobody will then hurt them more than the fall itself. And you have to train also the stakeholder to be in the mindset of not just judging, but understanding the team and understand how to help. You will see that the courage basically will come out instantly of the team, and they will start to say, okay, then we can try to do this. We can try to solve this in that way. But we didn't try that. No, let's go ahead. If we make a mistake, we will not be dead at the end. So you will start to hear this thing, and this is how you build actual courage. And one of the example I can give.
Awesome. In fact, I'm so glad that you were able to quote some of the learnings from the Advanced Scrum Master class. And I do agree. One of the best ways that I have learned where you can bring in some trust as well as the courage in the team members is by asking the question, how can I help you? And there has been a video on how can I help you and when to use it, what are the purpose. Somebody can go ahead and look at it. And with this, we are going to come to an end of the topic of learning. And then thank you so much, Vincenzo, for this presentation. You have been a student of the Advanced Scrum Master training, and as part of the certification program, you volunteered to present this live. And I'm glad that you did it. And there was a lot of questions that you have answered as well. Thank you so much for your time. And for people, yeah. Thank you. So for people who are watching this program, please don't forget to put your feedback on this program or your comments and observations for Vincenzo's presentation. It will certainly help him. And you want to see any other topics from other certified Scrum Masters or the Advanced Scrum Master students, you can always go ahead and present it. You can post that as a comment. We will look into those topics as well. For people who have come here for the first time, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you need any questions to be answered, feel free to reach us always. Okay, this is Naveen Anjandappa. This program was part of the Advanced Scrum Master program, and I am signing off. Thank you so much, Vincenzo, for your time and your knowledge sharing session. And thanks for all the people who have joined here. I'm going to say bye-bye. See you again in the next student with the next topic. Thank you.
Bye-bye.